Welcome to Creativity 101. What I do is I'm a professor of mass communication at St. John's University. And what I do is I teach undergraduate students how to be creative. I teach advertising, public relations, communications research. But in a former life, I was an instructional designer for Canon. I was a curriculum development specialist, so I used to develop e-learning courses from scratch, from scope document all the way through to Dreamweaver, Flash, action scripting. I used to make this stuff. And one of the things that I've started to learn doing this stuff for almost 20 years now is how important creativity is and how overlooked it is. And it seems like we can blame this on a few things. One of them could be technology, where we think the tools actually create the stuff. I always joke to my students, eventually Photoshop will just have a drop down and it'll say, send designer to my house. And you won't even, you don't have to do anything. But the real fact of the matter is that we need these tools to make stuff. But the important thing are not the tools, it's the actual stuff that we make and the process that we go through to make it. So some of the things that are part of my creativity are obviously teaching people. I've written 4 books and a bunch of articles on computer graphics, web portfolios, digital design, marketing and advertising, as well as I teach creative design, and I've been a designer for almost about 20 years now. As well, I work for Canon, and I have a little social entrepreneurship project that I work on. It's called PortfolioVillage.com, and it basically evolved from the fact that it's not about the tools, it's about the output. Teaching portfolio classes, the most important thing for college. Anybody here have a college age student right now? Somebody's paying for college, right? And we know it's expensive, it's a fortune. And what do you want your child to be? One thing.
Employee.
Happy. Right? Happy. You don't know how they're going to get there, but you want them to get there. Right? Because it's beyond just do what your parents did. Right? So one of the things that I add value with at the college is portfolios and creating portfolio curriculum, which we never had, to try to help students go out and show evidence that they have what the employers are looking for and that they can do what they want them to do. So as a graphic design professor many years ago, I used to teach Dreamweaver and Fireworks and Flash. And the art students were great because they were in the lab for 15 hours. But then I moved over to teaching communications. And a lot of those students are working in business. They're working in various fields. They don't have the technical skills. So one day I walk in and I see a young girl, and I have her in my class, and she's in tears because it's the last week of the semester, and she just can't figure out how to get her site together with Dreamweaver. So that was the impetus to create Portfolio Village, which is a DIY website maker, where it's not about the tool, it's about the content, but it gives you a very robust graphic design environment to be able to promote yourself. And I tried to eliminate all the obstacles. Basically, there's 2 obstacles to creating a web portfolio: technical and financial. So it's free and it's easy. And that's one of the things that I've been devoting the last 10 years of my life on creatively. So enough about me, because it's not about me, it's really about you and what you're going to learn today. So we're going to talk about a few things. 4 ways to be creative. We're going to talk about creativity using Bloom's taxonomy, but we're not going to be using old school Bloom's taxonomy pedagogy. We're going to be talking about new school Bloom's taxonomy, which is andragogy, which is different, which is leading adults as opposed to leading children. We're going to talk about how to exploit learner creativity, how to get people to really be creative in their learning beyond just lower order thinking skills. And that's something that we're going to talk a lot about. And then we're just going to talk about a couple of creative methods, a couple of things that you can do with your teams to be more creative on your own, and as well facilitate some of the exercises with other groups to try to motivate creativity out of other people. Okay? So, 4 ways to be creative. Creativity is the ability to make new things and think new ideas. Period. It's about new things, creating something new. Right? And we know when people try to slack on creativity, they get exposed. Right? Just ask Pharrell Williams and Robin Thicke, right? You infringe on somebody's creativity, right? They should have known it only took 20 minutes to write the song. You know? So, and how many times have you said this in your life? I got a great idea. How many times have you said that in their life? All the hands. Everybody said that, right? Everybody said that. But really, the problem is how do you execute? How do you get to the point where you have an idea to actually having something tangible? Right? That's why I love the keynote speaker, because he talked about going from nothing to actually accomplishing it. It took him his life, you know, as a young boy, you know, going up to being an adult, but I thought it was fascinating to show that he basically devoted a long period of time to creativity, and that's how he accomplished it. So it's applied, it's exhibited in every sense of our lives, right? How many of you have been at the conference and offered a creative suggestion to a colleague, to somebody that you were just sitting at the restaurant with, that you were chatting with, right? And that's where it becomes important, exchanges of ideas, but then getting to somewhere. So what is creativity? I did a literature review and I looked at a bunch of stuff and I tried to get it down to a very simple explanation, which is creativity can basically, you can do it in 4 ways. It can be emotional or cognitive, spontaneous, or deliberate. I'm going to talk a little bit about that, and then what's important is thinking about those ways and then designing and creating experiences that leverage those opportunities in people. So, deliberate. Deliberate is, a great example is Thomas Edison. Right? Deliberate is sustainable. It takes a long time, it takes a huge knowledge base to have deliberate creativity. Right? And we know that deliberate creativity requires what? Requires one thing. Sweat and one other thing.
Patience.
Failure. Right? You were right on all those fronts. You could have made a bullet list of all those, and that's true. But the one thing that really motivated Edison was what? Failing. Right? Failing. So then we have deliberate and emotional, which are those kind of those therapeutic, those aha moments, those when you're out of the scenario, when you kind of think of something, and all of a sudden, you ever have that? Anybody keeping a notebook by their desk when they're working on something important and you're scribbling and scrambling and, and you're just walking around with Post-its and they're everywhere, right? Because you have these aha moments. Then you have spontaneous and cognitive, which is, an example would be Newton and the apple. So Newton sees the apple and now he starts to equate it with another concept, with something that's parallel to that idea, but yet isn't that idea. What would be an example of this? I can't really think of one now. I need some spontaneous creativity to think of that. And then we have emotional and spontaneous, and those are our artists, our musicians, which we really don't know how they get inspired, right? We don't know where some of these things come from. Now, fostering it with an experience. Now, this is what it really comes down to. I know why you're here. You're going to go back and you're going to try to help somebody learn something. And hopefully you're going to be able to take creativity and kind of inject it into what you're doing to try to get higher order thinking skills in your employees. And why are those things important? Did anybody get that study by Adobe, the creative study? They sent it out a few months ago. It was about creative candidates. Well, basically they did a study, and what they've assessed is that 94% of employers think about creativity when they hire people. Creativity is going to become the most sought after skill. The most successful people in this life are the most creative people. So the idea of embracing creativity beyond just what we think is creative will benefit us all. So deliberate and cognitive, again, high degree of knowledge, lots of time. Lots of time. Who here uses deliberate and cognitive creativity? Again, all the hands should go up. Everybody's had a career, right? Has everybody had a career in here? Is that deliberate? Is it cognitive? Did you just wake up and know how to make things and teach people stuff? No, you learned, right? Like we all did. Like, wait, I went to college for 12 years. The deliberate and emotional, which requires your quiet time. You need to gain insights. You ever have that? And we've all done it, right? When I worked at Canon, I was a developer, so I basically sat in front of a monitor with headphones on and have, 3 months to do the project, and it was great. I really didn't have to answer calls. I worked with the SMEs, and once I had the scope documents, it was basically like, go make the stuff and, come back for a couple of check-offs when you hit the plateaus. But what I would do is a lot of times I would get stuck. So we had a cash machine. It was like 3 buildings over, and I'd always be like, I got to go get money. And there was a bench right outside the one building, and it would be so nice to just sit on the bench for 5 minutes and just think. Even though I was thinking about work, it was a way to get away from the environment, get away from all the, the cubicle and the computers and all of that, and just kind of, free your mind, get to a better space. So that's what that requires. Spontaneous and creative. This also requires getting away, but it requires you to get away and work in stages. So this is the way that I teach editing to my students. I teach a lot of writing classes. What I force the students to do is, I force them to write, and then they have to leave their assignments with me, and then I don't correct them, I give them back to them. And I say, you're going to be the editor. You're the writer, you're going to put a different hat on, and then go be the editor. And that's a whole different person. And it kind of forces them into process, which is important. And that's, spontaneous and creative helps us with process, and we're all process people here. Everybody that's in this room is into process. If you don't like process, you don't do instructional design, because it's all about process. It's all about steps, it's all about, that. So, and again, spontaneous and emotional, how do you design for that? That's very difficult. That probably can't be designed for. So, high degree of knowledge and lots of time. That's that salesperson that's been, digging at it for 20 years. That's that person. Deliberate and emotional. That could possibly be somebody that's new to the industry, new to the team, right? Spontaneous and creative, stopping work, getting away, continuing in stages. Doing this with your team, kind of forcing a staged process, and every part of the stage should be focused on not getting the task done, but focusing on how to be more creative. And then obviously, we can't do anything with spontaneous and emotional. That just kind of happens. Okay, so getting to Bloom's taxonomy. I did a dissertation on educational television and Bloom's taxonomy. So I studied educational programming, and I looked to see what percentage of programming on cable, public, and broadcast television was educational. You know how you see the little genres, instructional, educational. Anybody have children? When we were kids growing up, Saturday morning cartoons had a little EI in the corner, stands for educational, informational. Well, I studied that stuff, and I got to get very intimate with Bloom's taxonomy. But Bloom's taxonomy now has changed. It's not the same old Bloom's taxonomy. So back in 1956, this was the original taxonomy that Bloom and Kraftwald created. And what we see here is we see HOTS and LOTS. LOTS are lower order thinking skills. Because we know that we can create objectives, they can be psychomotor, they can be affective, or they can be cognitive. We're just talking about cognitive right now. So what we have here is we have the lowest level, which is what? Knowledge. That's your bubble sheet. That's your true or false. That's your multiple choice. Right? How many people engage in giving out those pieces? Me too. They're a necessary evil. If you need a broad level of knowledge, if you have to teach vocabulary, you have to use knowledge as an objective point. Right? So as we see, the highest level used to be evaluation. But there's one thing that's important about these words. They're all what? They're all nouns. Okay? And do nouns initiate action? No, they don't. They don't. So what we see here is when we're using the old Bloom's taxonomy, it was really good for pedagogy. It's really good. I have a 7-year-old, homework every night. A lot of it is knowledge, it's comprehension, and then it's application. Right? That's really where it goes. He's not making that, unless he's in art class. He's basically, they're showing him the formula, he's comprehending it, he's applying it, he's doing it over and over and over again until he knows it, right? Times tables, we've got fast facts, like fast math, those things. So we lived in a world where that became important because the other ways were much harder to figure out how to implement in learning. And they take a lot more thinking, right? And the easiest assessment to create is what? Yeah, knowledge, a multiple choice test, right? So in 2001, Kraftwald and Anderson, but Bloom passed away. Kraftwald was one of the original writers in '56 with Bloom. He hooked up with Anderson, and they basically recreated Bloom's taxonomy to become Bloom's digital taxonomy. Now, a couple of things are important. The reason they did this is because they had to compensate for the digital world to try to figure out how to integrate all of these digital tools. Who has a child in school that uses computers or iPads or something, right? And once the school has it, they have to figure out how to do something with it besides just give a multiple choice test on a web page. So what we have here is we have a real shift, and now we've gone from nouns to verbs, which is important. Change move. So andragogy, what are some of the assumptions? Okay. What do you think learners really care about? Just shout it out. What's in it for them? What else? Or what could be in it for them?
How will it help me in the future?
What's it?
How will it help me in the future?
How will it help me in the future?
Just tell me what I need to know.
Tell me what I need to know. What's my goal? And the goal really, for everybody, whether you realize it or not, we're all working for somebody, but the goal is really to build our own skills, because we don't leave those there. We take them with us, right? They could become part of our tool belt, and that's the sustained creativity. So a couple of things. I put together a little acronym here. So the first one is need to know. Adults need to know the reason why they're learning something. Right? Not just because I said so. Right? Just do it. As a parent, we try to bust that one out all the time. Sometimes when we give the explanations, they don't always work. Orientation. So the curriculum perspectives change. And now, what we've done is we've gone to a problem-centered approach. It's about solving problems, right? And with that comes content. Right? I always tell my students it starts with a problem and it becomes a project. And that's your work life. Problems and projects. And that's literally what you kind of just jump back and forth from whatever you're doing. So understanding that we're living in a problem-based world. And by them solving the problems, this becomes, part of their own personality. Readiness. Readiness to learn connects directly with the tasks that they're going to be doing in their social roles or their job roles. Right? So, when you teach a salesperson sales techniques, who does that here? Right? What's the reason? What is the way that you would motivate them to be better at those sales techniques? I know what everybody's going to say. Your money. Money. Right? So there has to be some sort of motivating factor. But really, you as the trainer working for the organization care about the organization, but we know that that person really cares about what? Their paycheck. So we have to use those values to motivate them, okay? And again, adults want stuff that has immediate relevance. And then foundation. And this is the kind of reservoir of experiences. We have to have what's called a learning spiral. Does anybody here use a learning spiral in what they're doing, where they start out maybe on one cognitive level and then they spiral up? We do it, it's a research term. Where you start off and you basically keep building to spiral down to get to something that can be grounded or that can be connected to something. So we need to do that as well. Right? We need to do that as well. And showing the foundation and how one experience leads to another. If you do X amount of sales in the next 3 years, you possibly could become the sales manager. And now this becomes a foundation. So you know what? I'm going to work off for the next 3 years because that's the next level for me. And if there is no next level, sometimes people aren't happy and they're looking for the next opportunity. So what are some of the strategies that we can use to exploit this creativity? Okay. So connecting now, Bloom and Knowles. Malcolm Knowles is the andragogy person. Bloom is the pedagogy person, and the taxonomy person. So how do we connect this together? How do we connect the taxonomy and the andragogy? So first level. And again, this is part of the spiral. Remembering. What are some things you do? Who's using some of these techniques right now? Flashcards, bookmarking, like discussion boards, sites like Delicious. Anybody's ever heard of Delicious? Right? Social bookmarking. It allows you to share bookmarks throughout a team, throughout a group. Discussion boards, quizzes, little quizzes embedded in PowerPoints and things of that nature. Then we have understanding. So here are some techniques that you can use for understanding. Summaries, reflective journals, show and tell. Has anybody used any of these techniques? Effective. All right, but again, we're still on what? Are we on a higher level or a lower level? Applying. So simulation, performance, games. We think that these are high-level learnings, but they're really not. They're really not. Coupled with other activities, we can take applications and performance in games, and we can integrate what into them? Creating. And now we really start to move the needle on the creativity part of it. So how do we get up to the higher levels? Well, analyzing. Okay? Mind maps, graphs, discussions, abstracts, right? Anybody here require their salespeople to journal or abstract a lost sale? Okay, like why'd you lose it? Like I'm having students do a project right now called they're doing a love letter and a breakup letter for a product. And they just have to write a letter of why I love you and why I want to break up with you. And it gets them like in a totally different mindset. It was so funny to see them actually writing with a pen on paper and, handing it in. So analyzing, discussions, looking at different data sets, and then evaluating, right? Debates, panels. Anybody have debates? Anybody have debates? Well, I'm talking about formal ones, not out at dinner last night on who's going to win the basketball game. So yeah, debating, meaning that having engaging conversation with two people. Now you have two people, one person closed and one person didn't close the deal. Talk about why you didn't close the deal. Talk about, but there has to be rules, and it has to be safe. But it can be so cleansing, I think, because we don't go there. You just don't go there. You'll get them next time. Why didn't you get him this time? Let's figure it out. And why did you get it? And now you make points as to, well, I got him because I showed up early for the appointment. And I had the brochures. And I was ready to do the demo. And now it's not to indict somebody, but it's to motivate them to try to be better. And then we get to creating, which now is the highest level, and it's the hardest way to try to get people to learn. Some of the things that are important are planning. Anybody have their folks making plans of any sort? Right? Planning, there's always planning involved. And now, with the plans, that's a great opportunity to put it down, to walk away, and then to come back as an evaluator, not as the writer. Because we always have this thing, I call it, students give me all the time, they walk up and they have this beautiful ad that they made. They come and say, Dr. DiMarco, look at this. I say it's great, but the headline is spelled wrong. You know? They have a resume, they look like it. I said, your name is spelled wrong. Right? And it's I call it the proud proofer syndrome, where we're so proud that we made something that we don't actually look at it. Do you have a question?
Did you ever get so close to something and work so close with it for so long that you've lost your objectivity? I do that. And I'm looking at it, and all of a sudden I'm not happy with it, even though somebody else is looking at it and thinks it's fine. I do that, and I don't know how to break it.
And that's a great point. I'm going through that right now with my Portfolio Village site. I've been running it for 10 years. I've always been a designer. I've always been making this stuff. But web design isn't as easy as it used to be. You know, pre-CSS, things were a lot easier. Now there's a lot more coding, and it just takes a lot of time. And if you want things to really look good, you know. So now I make PSDs, and I send them out to a shop, you know, and they're doing it. But I used to do all of that, and it was the hardest thing in the world for me to relinquish control. But I said I have to do it because I need somebody better than me. So maybe you don't need the person to do it, but maybe you need to get feedback and, you know, not to be afraid of it, but step away from it for a little while. You know?
I'm the person who gets the PSDs.
Okay.
And I create from those PSDs.
Okay.
But, you know, you look at something for so long, you're not really even seeing it. You're seeing something different. It's a very weird thing.
But from the other respect, if it's done well, then the usability is transparent and it works. Meaning if it's working, it's working. And that's another thing too that you have to kind of come to grips with creativity. You're not going to just do one thing that's going to be the greatest thing you've ever did. Even though everything we do we think is going to be that. We have to remember that we're constantly doing projects. And the goal should be to make everything the best thing it can be. It should be to learn from how it's not the best it can be and make the next one the best it can be, or keep refining it. Right? So I have students, I give them a project, they have to do a 5-slide presentation. I teach them digital media, principles of digital media. And they have to do a 5-slide presentation on some sort of design idea, but very narrow, like you know, grids or something, you know, Helvetica, like something very narrow, not anything big. You only get 5 slides, and you get 5 minutes to present it. And what was interesting is when I did it, I forced them to do it because I said that's how it works in the real world. You get 5 minutes to come up with an idea. After they gave their presentations, I critiqued them on design, on concept, design, content, and execution. And they get a little grade on that. And then I give it back to them. And when I give it back to them, what are they allowed to do? Fix it and get it back to me. Because that's how it works in the real world. When am I going to give you a broken project? It doesn't leave the shop until it's ready. So I'm trying to just instill that idea in them, and that's something that we have to struggle through, and it stinks, but it's part of the deal, and a way to kind of separate yourself is to work on something else that you want to do. And whenever I get stuck on something where I can grade 1,000 papers or something, I say, you know what? I'm going to work on a book proposal. I'm going to work on something for me to try to offset that, to try to get my creativity going in another direction, and then coming back. And I know you're all working on other stuff because that's how you learn. You know, that's how you learn. A lot of what you learn is fiddling at home, doing it on your own. So this is really the highest level. Plans, Game creation. Not playing the game, making the game. How many of you have done that? Tell your people, I want you to make the game. And then you take gamification ideas and you give them the pieces. You can even cut them out and put them out and make like a little colorforms thing where they create little fake games with the pieces. You make a game of making games. Design methods. The design methods that you use with your team can instill creativity. You know, the plain old scope document, which we all have to do in the beginning, is a text document, right? And it's subject to interpretation. It's not very visual. And then eventually, what do we typically move to? Something that is more visual. And once we move to that, that's when the understanding really starts to come in. When I worked at Canon, I was asked to, we were creating an application that was going to actually go on a copy machine, so that when you walked up to the machine, if you say you're a nurse and now you needed a patient record, instead of going all the way back to the nurse's station and going to the terminal, you go right up to the image runner machine, and there was an interface and a web application where you could go and just hit print, and now the PDF of that document would come out, or the stickers to put on, you know, to charge people. If you've been to a hospital, everything's a la carte. They put the stickers on everything, and then they scan them. That's how they charge you. So I was tasked to make this for Canon a long time ago. And now I'm meeting with engineers from Japan who are not really speaking English. All the top brass at Canon is from Japan. My boss said, okay, we'll come in, you know, on this meeting. And normally people bring in what? An outline. Is an outline the thing that you want to communicate with somebody interculturally with? No. So I made an integrated sitemap. And I showed just the little screens and the little pathway of the user and where they would go. It was very rough, but it was well done. And that's when we worked at Canon. I could print out this big poster of it. It was great. You know, it was with great printers. And I just remember this. He just looked at my boss and went like this. And that was the meeting. And we walked out. The boss was pat me on the back. He was like, good job. Fault. Okay, and then finally, the love of my life, portfolios. You know, as I told the story in the beginning, I got into portfolios as a graphic design professor. The students were making portfolios. They were art students. So they'd make a portfolio. You know, this is when we used to walk around with the big books, right? Well, we started to make web portfolios, putting stuff online. And then, you know, the web stuff was just coming in. You know, Macromedia was still around. They still owned Flash and Fireworks. You know, Adobe hadn't swiped them up yet. So what we would do is we would make print portfolios and we would make web portfolios. And they were very astute because they were designers. Once the students, once I went over to mass communications, students just didn't have those abilities. But the need for portfolios was even more important. So even in a portfolio, you think immediately it has to be some beautiful graphical work. I'm teaching students who are in advertising, public relations. Some of them want to be account managers. So a lot of the work is writing work. So I have to figure out how to show them how to present writing work in a meaningful way. The way that I do that is I teach them how to create very short 3-paragraph case studies where they identify the problem, they identify the solution, and then they talk about their role in the project. And it's 3 paragraphs. It's a very hard 3 paragraphs for them to write though. And what I try to explain to them is, and again, Andrew knows, why do I have to do this? I have an ad. Why do I have to write a caption about an advertisement? And I said, well, you're going to be standing next to somebody, and they're going to say, Mary, we do advertising. We do advertisements here at this job. Is that something you feel comfortable with? And you're going to be able to just look at them and say, as a matter of fact, I am. Here's an example in my portfolio, and let me just tell you quickly about the project. They already have the 3 paragraphs in their head. It's done. That's a check mark. And if you get enough check marks, you get the what? You get the job. Right? So I think that we can also, and this was my challenge, how do I come here and take this and turn it over? Last year, I don't know, did anybody see my session last year? I did a session on portfolios, but career portfolios for you guys to make portfolios. And I made the joke that this is the session your boss doesn't want you to go to. Right? Because they don't want you to get ready to leave your job. But it was funny, and as we started talking, a few people raised their hand and said, you know, I think there are other applications. And I said, there really are. Because why couldn't all employees have a portfolio? And now when your boss says what you're working on, he just goes to this page and sees your projects. Like McDonald's has a program right now where they're training people, they're teaching them careers outside of McDonald's. They're teaching them how to be programmers, this or that, just to try to get them to the next level. So the idea is that we want to coddle these people, we want to protect them, we want to keep them. But the way that you do that is you empower them and you make them feel like it's about them. And the stuff that they show in their portfolio now becomes a record for you beyond LinkedIn. Because LinkedIn that's the same set as everybody else. A real portfolio takes creativity. It's your design, it's your navigation, it's your content. You know, I have 20 students in the class. They're all advertising public relations majors. None of the portfolios look the same. Because it's all about the individual. So let's go into some of these creative design methods. SME collages. Anybody doing this? Nobody's doing collages? Oh, collages are super fun. Super fun. So you're coming up to a project, and anybody have a SME that really likes to kind of, how do I say this? They're interested in the design process and they've got opinions. Even though their purpose is to be a subject matter expert, right? It's like always in the world, I tell my advertisers that the copywriters always want to be designers and the designers always want to be able to write copy. Right? So what the SME collage does is it's a way for you to have them create what their vision is. And you can make a cutout set, have them put them together or work together with them to put together. But now it becomes more of a fun task than the same old process. And that's really what creativity, you know, and integrating it in is. It's breaking the same old processes that we have to try to do something different, right? What did Apple make their fortune on? Think different. So, you know, we get locked into these methods. I mean, I have the advantage because I teach in college, you know, I teach in college, so I decide what's going to go on. I can figure out what's going to happen. It's a little bit harder in organizations, but usually in learning organizations, hopefully I know when I worked at Canon, my boss was very forward-thinking. So when I came to him and said, I'm not going to give you the outline, I'm going to actually make this integrated site map, he's like, run with it, you know, because he trusted in my creativity. And I think that's one of the things that's lacking also with employers today. They don't trust in the creativity of their people. Because they're afraid people are going to get so creative that they're going to get their own ideas and they're going to want to leave. But I don't think it works like that. I think when you nurture creativity, people want to stay. Because now it's a place where lifelong learning is going to happen. And that's really, if you're a learning professional, the one thing that you're really into is learning. You wouldn't be sitting here on Friday morning if you weren't. So SME collages, give it a try. And you can even have fun with this. Like one way to do it is, anybody here working in a trade industry of some sort, grab a whole bunch of trade magazines, start cutting pictures out. And then just, even if it's not your stuff, where would you want to put this? Where would you want to do this? Where do you see this? You know, what do you see is important? Right? And it becomes kind of like a little color forms exercise. You guys remember color forms, right? Color forms? They're little plain things you put in the back. I say that to the students, that they don't even know what that means. So, design charrettes. What you can do here is you set people up in groups of threes, and they collaborate for a few minutes. And they do sketches, and they work, and then what you do is everybody contributes, and then two people move on, and the remaining person presents the ideas of the group. So it's a way for you to kind of have a team meeting in a way that is not dominated by anybody. You ever go to those meetings and one person is the only person talking? Right? I've been accused of that. So this is a good way to have everybody contribute. And now instead of getting one set of ideas, you're getting what? Yeah. And now everybody takes ownership, and you can have designers, stakeholders, clients, customers, and it's a really good way to impress the clients by saying, come on in. And we do this very creative exercise where we try to get out their thoughts, feelings, emotions, and ideas about the project, and you get to interact with everybody on the team in a way beyond just, here's your one contact, this is who you deal with, that person deals with that person, and that's it. That's a very linear chain. This becomes a very organic way to try to cultivate ideas. Parallel prototyping. Okay? Who's doing this? So it's one side, one shot, and that's it. Parallel prototyping, what it does is it encourages divergence. Right? And I know the biggest problem with doing this is what? Time. Right? It's time. But you know where it can be done quite easily in one session? Right here. Right here. This is your parallel prototyping setup. So what you do is you set up, you do this, you come up with a few ideas, and then you can make them anonymous, and then you can vote on them. So this becomes important. It promotes collaboration, and it also works great when you get stuck. So the idea of I'm stuck, I don't know where to go with this. Here's a great way to do it. Just try something else, even if you just do a rough sketch, a rough idea, to try to get something else. Yeah, the slides will be up right after the session, for sure. I don't put them up before the session because I like the discoverability. I want it to be, I don't know. Yeah, right? I don't want you laying in bed looking at my slides. So this, developing portfolios is not just for students. It's not just for career changers, career seekers. I found that portfolios, as I've been researching this stuff, I wrote my first portfolio book in 2006, a long time ago. And since then, I've spoken at various conferences, I've set up a business, I teach it, but I really see the value of it. And I think it's going to be one of the things, portfolios are going to be one of those things that are going to help us get people back to being more creative. And social media didn't do that. It didn't do it. What's the one thing that you give up when you become part of a group? Your
Individuality.
Yeah, your identity and your freedom. Right? And that's all social media is. It's just a big group of us in the same template. Right? So the portfolios allow you to flex your creative muscles. They allow you to think beyond just the same setup. And that's why LinkedIn now has come to the realization that they have to allow people to show their own content on the site, videos, link to your own website, and that kind of stuff, because it's getting bland. So it gives you a reflective approach, and it totally initiates andragogy, because it's about you. It's about making meaning of what you've done. It's about the evidence in your professional life. It's a way for you to inject your personality. It also becomes a sandbox now for creativity. It becomes a place where now you can practice being creative. Okay? I tell my students all the time, they go work, we send students internships, they're working for large companies. I teach in New York City. So I have interns, they're working for Madison Square Garden, they're working for, Edelman PR, they're working for Deutsche Advertising, they're working for large companies. And the one thing that sets them apart is the portfolio. Because I always tell them, I say, look to the left, look to the right. What does the person next to you have that's the same as you? And it's that 4-year degree. This isn't 1950 where if you have a college degree, you're important. Everybody's got a college degree now. So the way to set yourself apart is to show evidence. Show evidence of what you can do and how it's benefited not only you in your learning, but somebody else. So you can go check out my portfolio. It's drdimarco.com. But I'm a professor and I teach design. So on my portfolio, one of the things that I did early on was I created a gallery of work from my students. Even though my work is on there, there's a lot more of my students' work because in the scheme of things, I'm more of a teacher than I am a designer at this point in my life. I still do both. But this becomes important, and now this becomes a tool for me to teach andragogy. So when they come into that animation class and they're going to learn, Maya, or they're going to learn, 2D with Flash, or they're going to learn, how to use Photoshop, I show them examples of what the other students have done. And now they say, you know what, I want to do that. So that brings me to the final thing. I left cards on the seats. If you flip over your card, somebody won a book, but this is my latest book. Oh.
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
What platform do you recommend for a portfolio?
Well, I'll explain that in 1 second. But the reason that I'm just mentioning the book is not to hawk it, but the point is that I published a book with Pearson, and it's how to create your resume, your cover letter, your print portfolio, and your web portfolio. I use it in curriculum. So that's why I made it really thin. It's color, and inside of it are all examples of what? The students who I've had in the past who have gotten jobs, who have made the portfolios and the resumes. So now it's like, this is your book, but the people who were sitting in the chair before you, and then you know how I motivate them? So when I do the second edition, your work might be, but immediately everybody raises the bar, right? So congratulations. So just platforms and portfolios. Portfolio development has evolved. Portfolio Village that I use, my technology partner is the biggest site maker in the UK. Its parent company is Hibu, which is a large SEO marketing firm in the UK. But there are others out there. There's been a kind of an explosion. I kind of missed the boat on it. If I was smart, because I've been running the site for 10 years, but there are sites like Weebly, Wix, and when we say DIY, meaning it's do it yourself, but it's robust enough where it doesn't look cheesy. It's a graphic design environment. So I have them create these portfolios, and instead of writing a paper, maybe I'll have them do an interactive website on a subject, where now they practice web writing as opposed to essay writing, which you don't do a whole lot of, a little bit better. Right? So I have them create these portfolios, and instead of writing a paper, maybe I'll have them do an interactive website on a subject, where now they practice web writing as opposed to essay writing, which you don't do a whole lot of, unless you go into journalism, or you're going to, unless you're married rich and you're just going to sit home and write all day. It really doesn't have that much of an application. So I try to get them to create sites for topics, and now they create multimedia content as opposed to just writing. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.